Very much a psychological horror game, and I feel like psychological horror games are the ones that give me like the most PTSD, but it does really look like a pretty game. It does say that it has photorealistic graphics. That's one of the features, is photorealism, although I'm not sure if, I mean, it is a pretty game. I wouldn't go as far to say photorealism. I mean, it's definitely a decent looking game. Maybe not as good as some other projects, but definitely up there. But there is going to be an inventory system. There is going to be physical items. So again, kind of like, I'm going to say probably a big inspiration from Penumbra. Your ability to kind of like move things around. And Penumbra was really cool. You could even open up drawers, or the other games by the development team of Penumbra also have kind of like physics-based interaction, which I think is really cool. The game relies a lot on its sanity gameplay element, so your sanity is your key to survival. Paranormal events will hinder your progress throughout the game, so you have to make sure that you keep your sanity levels in check, or you will succumb to insanity. You also have dual wielding in the game, which is interesting. So I guess you could have like an axe in one hand and then, I don't know, like a torch or a wand or whatever. Some of the stuff that he's holding in this game, I'm not entirely sure how dual wielding is gonna like help, but you know, it's like, oh, I've got this voodoo head in one hand and a torch in the other. But you know, but one thing that I think is really cool is the procedural generation. So one of the things that they're advertising is that there's going to be procedurally generated events. So you're going to have different irregular paranormal events in addition to randomly located items that appear in different spots for every single game level. So that also kind of reminds me of the SCP games, where you kind of have randomization, which makes it more difficult to just like speed run an environment, which I think definitely adds to the horror elements. So I do think that this is a really interesting project. Hey look, he's got some dual wielding here. He's got the camera and the lighter. So I do think that this is a really interesting horror game. You should definitely check it out. It's called Dark Fracture. It's going to be coming out in the next couple of months on Steam. I think it definitely looks interesting. And yeah, besides that, I guess I'll see you guys in the next one. There's a whole bunch more games that I'm looking forward to covering, so make sure you stick around. And if you want to check this out and you think this game looks cool, let me know down below in the comments. All right, cheers, ladies and gentlemen. I will see you again soon.
Hey everyone, today I'm going to be showing you how a chemical can solve a maze.
CG 3D objects are everywhere. They're in movies, video games, ads, and almost every digital platform.
Seems easy enough. So, you're finally editing your vlogs with Filmora 9. Yeah? And you're editing that
you can think of. But how do they work? And how does that apply to you, wrinkles, and this weird worm? Well, because you can make any of the above things for free right now on your computer. So how do 3D models work? To answer that, we have to get a little bit technical. A 3D model is made up of a number of vertices, which make up a model's faces, or polygons. In order to represent this geometry in a meaningful way, though, you need to have lighting, which, in flat shading, is calculated by using the angle between the direction a polygon is facing and the direction of a 3D light source. This will determine how bright or shadowed each face should be. In modern graphics, every vertex has a set direction it's facing, which can be averaged to create a smoother surface, known as smooth shading. Okay, so now you have a 3D object, but it looks super boring. We need to spice it up. That's why you need to know about texture mapping. Texture mapping is the process of taking a 2D image and wrapping it around a model in order to give it custom surface information like color, glossiness, shadows, and displacement. I won't get into the different methods of mapping a texture to a surface or all of the different types of texture map, but I'll go over some important ones, like color, glossiness, emission, and the star of this video, normal or displacement maps. So what are normal maps? The difference between a normal map and a displacement map is the presence of geometry. Now, I know what you're thinking, but why would you not want geometry? Well, it's important to note that the more geometry you have, the more computational resources it takes to render out. This is fine if you're working on high-budget visual effects shots where you have time to render, but if you were playing a game using a model with millions of vertices, you'd break your laptop. That's where normal maps come in. They look super funky, and that's because they're storing XYZ displacement as RGB colors. So red displaces the X, green displaces Y, and blue displaces Z. Most of the map is purplish blue, which represents no displacement. Now, they're not actually displacing the geometry, but rather the perceived angle of a model's surface, allowing light to interact with it differently. So it's kind of faking you out and not actually making more geometry, thus using less computer resources. So what about displacement maps? Displacement maps are a different story. They actually displace the geometry, so you need a lot of it for one to work in the first place. Normal maps are perfect for small surface imperfections and dents. Normal maps are, so you need a lot of it for one to work in the first place. Normal maps are perfect for small surface imperfections and dents, but they look noticeably wrong for larger deformations. That's where displacement maps come in. You can use them to create landscapes, bumps, rocks, or anything else, but they use much more computer resources. So what are wrinkle maps? Technically, they're called tension maps, but I thought wrinkle maps sounded like a more fun video title. Plus, tension maps do actually show where wrinkles would go. Tension maps show where an altered mesh has amounts of stretching and compression. You can use tension maps to apply different effects to the defined areas, like putting a wrinkly normal map in the compressed areas or making the stretched areas more shiny, like skin is when it's stretched. You could also make these areas change color to emulate blood flow, light up, or become glossy. The incredibly popular and free 3D software Blender apparently used to have this functionality, but according to a post by Chris Jones on Blender Community, the feature was removed before its potential was realized by Blender's users. Why are wrinkle maps important though? They're important because without them, it would not be feasible to animate and emulate human skin. More information about that is provided in the description, linking to Chris Jones' post. They also allow for different effects in affected areas that would either be very hard or impossible to recreate without them. So how can you play with tension maps? First, download Blender. Then get this free add-on developed by Steve, link in the description, that allows for the use of tension maps in Blender. I asked him about how his add-on works, and he said that it is based on calculating how much farther or closer the vertices of a mesh move from each other, which is super cool. The add-on outputs the tension to vertex colors, which are colors that can be assigned to individual vertices, and vertex weights, which I won't go over here. The compression is stored as the color red and the stretch as green. You can separate these values to do things with the individual channels. He's still working on and developing the add-on, so make sure to keep up with it for the newest cool features. I am creating a small 2 to 3 minute tutorial on my channel on how to use them to create a floppy hot dog easily, so make sure to check that out. Tension maps are such a cool and overlooked thing amongst the Blender community, and I think there are some seriously cool things you can make with them, like characters, worms, artwork, or whatever. If you make anything using tension maps, please tag me on Instagram at KexNext so I can see it. I'd love to see what you come up with.
So I have 3 different mazes here, and I'm going to be using an effect called the Marangoni effect in order to solve these mazes almost instantly with a chemical. Okay, so in order to do this, I need a solution of a fatty acid. So I chose oleic acid here, and I mix it in an alkaline solution of potassium hydroxide. So this is just a little bit of oleic acid through the whole maze. And then at the end of the maze where I want to get to, I'm going to put the hydrochloric acid. And I just have a little sponge here as a source for my hydrochloric acid at the end here. And then all I do is drop in the dye particles, and the dye should follow the shortest path of the maze. Okay, so first we're going to try it on my smallest maze here. And then if this works, we're going to go to my bigger maze, and then for the final finale, I'll go to a much more complex and bigger maze. Okay, let's drop in the dye. Whoa, look at it immediately start to go. It just follows the shortest path right there. It immediately goes to the end of it. So what's neat about this is it doesn't just follow the shortest path, but you can also find the next shortest path. One of the problems with the computations of the shortest path is it will tell you the shortest path, but it doesn't often tell you alternative paths. But in this setup here, you can alternatively find not just the shortest path, but the next shortest path as well. Okay, let's try with our slightly bigger maze, which has the same path as before. Whoa, look at it go. It works great. It just pulls it right up through the shortest path there. So what we've set up here is basically this concentration gradient through the maze of deprotonated and protonated oleic acid. So what will happen is the dye will get pulled towards the part that has the higher surface. Okay, and finally we're going to try it with our biggest maze. Pull the liquid up through it. It could take longer, but we'll see if it can actually solve this complex maze. So first I put in my fatty acid alkaline solution. And then I drop in my hydrochloric acid. And now let's put in my blue dye here. So you can see at first it kind of diffuses both ways, but then it can start to find that concentration gradient and sort of get pulled up through it. And as it gets closer and closer to the acidic solution, then the pull gets stronger. Whoa, look at it start to meet there and just create this turbulent flow. So you can see how strong the pull is there. It's actually sucking up the liquid, you can see it. So this blue dye that I have here is also changing color due to the pH. So it starts off blue and kind of ends up as this reddish yellow color. So efficient maze solving or finding the shortest path between 2 points of a